Good morning, everybody. It's Tuesday morning, and welcome to Penn Vicarage. And it's getting colder, isn't it? But it's good to be here, and great to see you this morning. And thank you, as always, for joining us for our Bible talk for today. Just a couple of notices, if I may. Firstly, to say that this coming weekend, apart from our normal services, instead of Evensong this weekend, at 5:30 in the evening, we are singing carols on the green outside St. Bart's. So come along, wrap up warm, bring whatever you want to bring with you, and we'll stand up and we'll sing the praises of Jesus outside on the green this coming Sunday evening. The other thing for you is, if you know of anybody that might be interested in our Alpha course, we'll be doing it again in the new year at St. Bart's. And if you want to join it online, if you let us know, we'll send you a Zoom link as well. And you'd be very, very welcome to join us for that as well. If you'd like to join it, just send me an email or something, or send a message to the St. Bart's Facebook or whatever, and we'll be in touch. But for today, it's Psalm 25. Here goes. To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. O my God, in you I trust. Do not let me put to shame. Do not let my enemies exult over me. Do not let those who wait for you be put to shame. Let them be ashamed who are wantonly treacherous. Make me to know your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day long. Be mindful of your mercy, O Lord, and of your steadfast love, for they have been from of old. Do not remember the sins of my youth or my transgressions. According to your steadfast love, remember me for your goodness' sake, O Lord. Good and upright is the Lord. Therefore he instructs sinners in the way. He guards the humble in what is right, and teaches the humble his way. The paths of the Lord are steadfast love and faithfulness, for those who keep his covenant and his decrees. For your name's sake, O Lord, pardon my guilt, for it is great. Who are they that fear the Lord? He will teach them the way that they should choose. They will abide in prosperity, and their children shall possess the land. The friendship of the Lord is for those who fear him, and he makes his covenant known to them. My eyes are ever towards the Lord, for he will pluck my feet out of the net. Turn to me and be gracious to me, for I am lonely and afflicted. Relieve the troubles of my heart, and bring me out of my distress. Consider my affliction and my trouble, and forgive all my sins. Consider how many are my foes, and with what violent hatred they hate me. O guard my life and deliver me. Do not let me be put to shame, for I take refuge in you. May integrity and uprightness preserve me, for I wait for you. Redeem Israel, O God, out of all its troubles. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Okay, it's not a particularly well-known psalm, but it's another beauty, isn't it? They're all good, aren't they? This is one psalm where I understand, according to the commentators, people write these fancy books, this is one psalm when it'd be helpful to speak in Hebrew, because I mentioned a few days ago that the psalms are in poetry. And what you wouldn't know unless you spoke Hebrew is that there are 22 verses in Psalm 25, and there are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. And this is what's called, apparently, an acrostic. So a bit like A, B, C, D, E, so it's one verse for each letter of the alphabet. Apparently this is in Hebrew. Now, unless you happen to speak Hebrew, you wouldn't know that. But this is 22 verses, 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, which is kind of why it is the way it is. So it's a classic example of Hebrew poetry. So we've had parallelism before when it says something and then repeats it. Here we have a classic example of what's called an acrostic. So that's that. But inside that, what we have here is another psalm, another cry for help, and it reads a little bit clunkily at times. But actually, what I think, because it's an acrostic, and obviously the writer's trying to make it such, there are kind of, I'm going to pick up 5 themes in this psalm, which kind of, because that's kind of, I think that's the best way of approaching it. Firstly, the guy David has got enemies, and that's quite clear. And the psalm begins and ends with David lays out his problems and he asks God for help. And it's stuck in the first 3 verses and the last 3 or 4 verses as well. He's saying, I've got help. Please, will you help me, O God? And these enemies are enemies of not just him, but also they're crooked, and what's more, they're also against what he stands for as well. So that they are clearly his enemy. They are clearly crooked, and what is more, they are against what he stands for as well. So it's almost like, Lord, don't let them get the better of me, because what I stand for is under threat here as well. So the first theme, you might say, is that of he's David's got enemies, and he's crying to God for help, and he kind of begins and ends with that. And I think it's worth us acknowledging that we don't get on with everybody in life, do we? But there are significant bodies of people out there who don't like what we stand for, who will oppose us because of what we believe, and who we are and what we stand for. And it's worth acknowledging, as I say, I think sometimes Christianity in the church has got a reputation for being a bit all kind of mealy-mouthed and a little bit cuddly and a bit kind of a bit twee. Actually, this acknowledges the fact that there are people that not only don't like us, but they don't like what we stand for too. And I think that's what this psalm is about. And it begins and ends. And the first theory is with the first theme is to do with enemies and pleas to God for help. That's the first thing. So that's the problem David's got. There are that's the one thing. There are four kind of things that David does. The first thing he does is he asks God for guidance. So he asks God what to do. Make me to know your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. So he wants to know the way ahead, and he asks God for guidance. He's in trouble here. I guess there are probably many things he could have done. Running to the hills being perhaps one of them. Fight or flight. What is he to do? And he's not just relying on his own ideas and his own creativity. He's turning to God as well. So he pleads to God. God, please guide me. God, show me what to do. And of course, we are approaching Christmas. We remember Jesus, the light of the world, the light which helps us to see in the darkness. So he's got these enemies against him, and the first thing he pleads for is he pleads for guidance. That's the first thing. There's the enemies and this plea for guidance. Then there's a theme here of trust, and actually the word for trust here in the Hebrew is the word wait, and you see the word wait, W-A-I-T, 3 times in this psalm. To trust God means to wait on God, and the word wait means trusting in God. It's the same Hebrew word apparently here. And so the way you trust in God is that you wait on God. And I say this against myself. Often, I tell myself I trust God for something, but then I go and, but actually to wait on God means, yes, God, I trust you and I will wait on you. And therefore I'm going to try not to worry, and I'm going to try and put my trust and my faith in you. And the word wait, which you see 3 times in this psalm, is code for that David trust in God. So he's trusting in God so he looks to God for guidance, and he's waiting on God, and as he's trusting in God too. And why can he trust in God? Because of what called God's steadfast love. The Hebrew word is hesed, and you see the word 3 times, steadfast love. I think it's in verses 6, 7, and one further on as well. Forget where it is. Is it 10? Yeah, 10. 6, 7, and 10. You see God's steadfast love, that God is faithful and he never stops loving. He doesn't turn the tap off. So David can trust in God because David knows of God's steadfast love. And David, no doubt, will be able to remember times when God has been steadfastly loving to him in the past, when God's helped him through times. That God's love is not something which comes and goes. God's love is steadfast. God's love continues. Jesus Christ the same yesterday, today, and forever. And the theme of God's steadfast love is like a line through a stick of rock, all the way through the Bible. God's hesed, God's steadfast love to everybody, including you and me. But finally, and I think this is important too, David's also quite keen to confess his sins. David knows that he is not perfect. And David knows that there are things that he has done and no doubt does, which are not right. And David is right to confess his sins before God. And I think it's right that we do that, actually, because we can be full of faith. But I think sometimes religious people can be so sort of full of it, we can almost come across as though we're holier than thou. There's none of that with David at all. David is more than happy to admit that there are times when he's fouled up. And of course, the most famous one of which being when he fouled up with Bathsheba and he committed adultery with her and had her husband bumped off and she became pregnant. I mean, it's all in the Bible. David was more than aware of his own shortcomings. He was aware of his sins, and they come through regularly. And it's right for us, actually, You know, there's sort of, and it's right to stand for things. It's right to, and it's right to stand up for moral issues, and so on and so on and so on. And it's right to acknowledge what God's done in their lives, etc., etc., etc. But we must always remember that we are sinners, and that we all have things about our life that aren't right, and things that need clearing up in our lives too. And David is quite. You hear him hearing, confessing his sins. Consider my affliction and my trouble, and forgive all my sins. And so on and so on and so on. For your name's sake, O Lord, pardon my guilt, for it is great. So David's quite happy to admit that there's things about his life that need correcting. He turns to God for mercy as well. So here we have in this acrostic psalm, we have a man crying for David, looking for help from his enemies. We see that at the beginning and the end. He turns to God for guidance. He has complete trust in God. He waits on God. He can trust in God because of God's hesed, God's steadfast love. But he's also always prepared to admit that there are things about him that aren't right, that he has sins that need forgiving. And actually, it's something we need to remember as well. Bless you, my friends. More tomorrow. Have a